Retirement feels scary because it seems like your net worth will start shrinking, like the clock's ticking and the money slowly slipping away. But for a surprising number of retirees, the opposite happens. Their wealth actually keeps growing, sometimes a lot, and it feels completely backwards. How can your net worth increase after you stop working? Yet the facts point in that direction, and the reasons behind it catch most people off guard. If you're planning for retirement, understanding this could change everything. You've probably heard of the famous 4% rule for retirement, but few people fully understand it. The idea is simple. If you withdraw 4% of your savings every year, adjusted for inflation, your portfolio should last at least 30 years. That rule is based on backtesting across decades of stock and bond returns, including the most brutal times, like the Great Depression and the 1970s stagflation era. It was designed as a worst-case safe withdrawal guideline, and the guy who created it, Bill Bengen, later said that in normal conditions, people could actually withdraw closer to 5%. The original 4% figure is actually conservative, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. A huge myth about retirement is that your expenses are going to skyrocket. People imagine endless travel, fancy restaurants, a calendar packed with activities, and ballooning healthcare costs. That fear of spending more is what makes so many people worry they'll run out of money. But the data tells a very different story. As the years go on, most retired people actually spend less, not more. Actually, spending typically goes down significantly, and not for the reasons you might think. Let's put the numbers to it. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, households aged 65 to 74 spend around $65,000 per year. By the time people are 75 and older, that drops to about $53,000. That's a huge difference, more than $12,000 less every year, or almost a 20% reduction. And when you zoom out even more, you see the pattern clearly. The average household in the US, regardless of age, spends about $77,000 per year, but retirees spend much less than that. Now, why does spending go down? A few reasons. First, the obvious one, travel. A lot of people dream of spending retirement on the road, taking cruises, exploring the world, finally checking off bucket list trips. And many do for the first few years, but eventually the desire fades, energy levels change, long flights feel exhausting, packing, airports, and constant moving around become stressful instead of exciting. The appeal of sleeping in your own bed starts to outweigh the thrill of sightseeing. Travel almost always slows down with age, and so do the costs that come with it. The same thing happens with entertainment and dining. Early retirement might include more restaurants, shows, concerts, and activities. But as people get older, they naturally stay closer to home. Their routines simplify. They cook more, they go out less, and the spending follows. Transportation costs, which are usually a huge drain for most households, drop dramatically further into retirement. Couples often share a single car. There's no daily commute, no endless school drop-offs, and no constant back and forth between work and activities. Even if retirees stay busy and get out often, they're simply not putting nearly as many miles on their car as a working family does. Even healthcare, which is the one category that can rise in later years, doesn't offset the drop in all those other areas. On net, expenses go way down. And this isn't just about aging. Younger retirees go through the same thing. That honeymoon phase of retirement often comes with higher spending, but eventually reality kicks in. People settle into a new rhythm, expenses stabilize, and spending usually lands at a much lower, more sustainable level. Not because they have to cut back, but because they want to. It's a personal preference, not a financial necessity. Next, we need to factor in something that quietly makes a bigger difference than most people realize: Social Security. The average Social Security check is about $2,000 per month. For a retired couple, that's roughly $48,000 per year, inflation adjusted and showing up every month. When you combine that with declining spending, the gap that needs to be covered by withdrawals is much smaller than people assume. Let's take a typical couple in their late 60s who spends about $65,000 per year. At first glance, that sounds like they need well over $1 million saved to cover it, right? But here's where it gets interesting. If that couple receives around $48,000 per year from Social Security, which is average for two people, their real gap isn't $65,000, it's only about $17,000. They don't need a massive portfolio to make retirement work. A modest nest egg paired with Social Security often covers the bulk of what retirees actually spend. And here's where it gets even better. That $65,000 in annual spending doesn't stay that high forever. As people move into their mid-70s and beyond, the average spending drops to the $53,000 level. That's a built-in $12,000 reduction. Why? Less travel, fewer big purchases, and just a natural slowdown on day-to-day expenses. Now look at what that means financially. If their Social Security is still around $48,000 and their spending falls to $53,000, the gap shrinks to just $5,000 a year. That's all they need to pull from their portfolio. Now here's the part most people don't fully understand. That 4% guideline assumes you'll keep spending the exact same dollar amount adjusted for inflation every single year, no matter what's happening in the world. But let's be real, do people actually live like that? Of course not. Think about it. Imagine you've just retired, you've got your spending plan set, and suddenly the stock market drops 40%. Are you really going to book that $6,000 cruise to Italy without a second thought? Probably not. You might decide, you know what, let's do a long weekend within a few hours drive instead, and save the big trip for later. Or picture another scenario. Inflation spikes and your food bill is suddenly $200 more every month. You're not going to shrug and spend like nothing's changed. You might swap a few steak dinners for chicken, or delay upgrading your kitchen appliances until prices stabilize. Even when the economy just feels shaky, like headlines about layoffs or rising interest rates, most people naturally become more cautious. Maybe you decide to keep your old car another year instead of buying a new one. Maybe you skip a home upgrade you were considering. The small, natural adjustments completely shift things in your favor, and those little choices, repeated over 20 or 30 years, create a massive safety buffer. And the reverse is true too. When markets are strong, retirees often loosen up and spend a little more. So retirement spending isn't a straight line, it flexes with the environment, which causes the math to work favorably. The 4% rule assumes the worst case scenario, that you never adjust, but in reality, nearly everyone does. By naturally cutting back during rough patches and spending a little more when times are good, portfolios often stretch much further than the models assume. Let's break down the 4% withdrawal rate a little further and see what it really means. It's based on a portfolio with a big chunk in bonds and assumes the absolute worst case scenario for timing, inflation, and stock market returns, based on history. It doesn't factor in any flexibility, like adjusting your spending when times get tough. In reality, if you're only taking out around 4% each year, your investments will almost always grow faster than inflation. Historically speaking, that 4% is conservative. It's designed to survive even the roughest economic stretches, not your typical market conditions. And again, this is based on history. And here's where the psychology kicks in. Most people entering retirement overestimate what they'll spend. They plan for the high end and they live on the low end. Combine that with decades of saving habits, frugality, the satisfaction of watching net worth and portfolios grow, and the natural fear of running out of money, and retirees almost always withdraw less than they technically could. This is why net worth can actually take off after retirement. With portfolios not being fully tapped, growth can be exponential. Researchers call this the consumption gap. Retirees could spend more, but they don't. By underspending, their investments keep compounding, and decades later, they've grown their wealth and by a lot instead of seeing it dwindle. Picture this. You retire with $1 million and plan to withdraw 4% per year. That's $40,000 on top of Social Security. But in reality, your expenses end up being lower than expected, so you only take out around 2%. Your total income might end up around $68,000 with average Social Security income, still above the typical spending for someone 65 to 74. Because your withdrawals are so modest, you leave the rest invested entirely in the S&P 500, which historically averages about 10% annually. Over time, that portfolio grows much faster than you'd expect. By year 10, it could easily be over $2 million, even if you gradually increase your withdrawals by 4% every year. Even real estate works in retirees' favor. Home values in the U.S. have historically grown about 3 to 5% per year. Many retirees own their homes outright, so that equity just sits there appreciating while their actual spending declines. So when you put this all together, conservative withdrawal assumptions, natural spending declines, Social Security, and the psychological reluctance to spend down savings, it becomes clear why retirees often grow wealth instead of losing it. Of course, this doesn't mean everyone. There are plenty of people who retire with very little and struggle financially. But for those who enter retirement with even a modest nest egg, the data shows a consistent pattern. They're more likely to end with more money than less. Everyone worries about running out of money, but with a smart, well-planned retirement, your net worth can actually skyrocket, which makes the bigger risk not running out, but underspending out of fear and missing out on life while you're still healthy enough to enjoy it.